Yeah, lads, I'll lead this group in, you know.
100 years on, as we can see, it's still a thriving part of the community.
At a time before the NHS, he was known for forgetting to charge anyone below the status of middle class.
Me old chestnut, how you been? And welcome back to A Thing of the Past. Thank you for all your support so far. Now, earlier this year, when we were filming our episode on the children's friend, George Smith of Coalville, we met Jim Goodger of Crick. Jim's ability to take us through the history of Crick with literally 10 minutes notice had us captivated. During this meeting, it became clear that it is George Smith's son, Dr. Arthur Grosart Smith, who is more well remembered in the village of Crick, and we believe that his story is one that needs to be told, not just because of his impact on a local level, but because of the impact it shows of the First World War on those who fought it. The ex-servicemen's club, one of his fruits of his labour, is now over 100 years old, and we were invited along to the celebrations. We hope you enjoy this episode. Many histories of the First World War end when the fighting stopped. However, for those who served, the impact would be with them for many years to come. Since the centenary years, due to developing attitudes to mental health, much has been written on the 325,000 men who suffered either permanently or temporarily from shell shock, the term coined by Dr. Charles Myers in 1915, but still largely misunderstood by the end of the war. In 1928, there was still a staggering 65,000 men being treated for shell shock in Britain. For many men, the comradeship that they'd developed during the war became the main tool for overcoming this post-war. Here in Crick, almost immediately, Dr. Grosart Smith recognised this, and later, on a national level, so did the British Legion.
So this is the cabin purchased by Dr. Arthur Grosart Smith's father, George Smith, from the Royal Bounty Fund. On returning home from the RAMC, Dr. Smith realised that the men in the community needed somewhere to meet, to replace that comradeship that had been lost during the army, and talk about their experiences of the war. In this building to the side here, up to 50 men could meet, and it replaced that organised structure that the army had had in their lives. So we're now outside Crick Ex-Servicemen's Club, which is the old boys' school. The girls' school was built just opposite.
The building had been vacated by 1918, and it was on Dr. Smith's behest that by 1921 the club was being used by the ex-servicemen for meetings, probably on a peppercorn rent. A peppercorn rent is a token contribution to the legal owners of a property, and in this case shows the goodwill of the school in allowing the community to have free use of the unused school building.
100 years on, as we can see, it's still a thriving part of the community.
The British Legion was founded in 1921 and was an amalgamation of the different organisations that made up what was known as the Silver Badge Party. Despite the word party, this was actually a movement that included groups who supported pensions and different features needed by ex-servicemen. They did this by sponsoring political candidates in by-elections and the 1918 general election. Because of the Russian Revolution and the subsequent Civil War, the government feared these groups and they closely monitored them, and right-wing factions were set up in response.
We then met with Danny, the club chairman, who showed us around some notable graves in St Margaret's churchyard. Some of the men buried here even spent time with Dr. Grosart Smith at the cabin when they returned back from the war.
When you think what he did, it's incredible. You know, these are the guys that were, like you said, stretcher bearers and doing all the
labour jobs.
The labour jobs, indeed. Good description. Yeah. At least now he's recognised and, you know, well done.
Royal Air Force.
He was a pilot, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know too much about him, but if he was an Air Force pilot, then we know that he...
Did his bit.
Yeah.
Artillery.
Yeah. So
1921.
So you can imagine what state he was in when he came home.
Yeah.
To pass away.
21.
Ironic, age 21, passed away in 21.
So even when the war ceased, he was only 18 when the war finished.
Yeah. He was in the artillery.
Wow.
Oh, a lot of these lads used to say, oh no, I'm 20, I'm not 18, I'm 20, or no, I'm not 17, I'm 21. And this young man in the parachute regiment,
1944.
he was 22 when he was no longer with us.
So June 1944, so would that be D-Day? Would he have been dropped behind?
It's possible, it's possible. I really don't know that much about him.
Wow.
But if you think about it, at 44 and you're a pilot.
Yeah. Okay.
He was in the Pioneer Corps, as you can see, and again, you think about the bloody awful work and jobs that these guys did, you know?
And a lot of those people had been transferred from the infantry regiment when they'd been wounded, and then they had to go and do that.
Indeed. But again, another village boy.
DCM.
And we are a DCN.
Wow.
So he didn't do bad, a Distinguished Conduct Medal, did he?
So was that, did he win that in the First World War, do you think?
Yeah. Well, you'd have to show that you were...
Yeah, some leadership skills.
Some leadership skills and being a bit up front, you know. Here lads, I'll lead this group in, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of them were won when officers or NCOs were wounded, and then someone just took the lead off their own back, didn't they?
Exactly. There's always a natural leader. Major in the parachute regiment.
Wow. Youngest major.
Yeah.
Warren Point, Northern Ireland.
His father was in the First War and was on our honours board.
Right.
He fortunately came home and, you know, so he used to go up to, well, of course he did, he used to go up to Dr. Smith's and... Yeah. But this was only a small village, you know. Socially, I find it really difficult to... How on earth they did what they did, and thank God for people like Dr. Smith.
Yeah. Because in the First World War, of the 300 who went, 100 of them didn't come back.
Exactly.
Shocking, isn't it?
It is. Well, that's why the Pals regiments were disbanded.
Yes.
Our whole communities were being obliterated.
Yeah.
Danny then took us to see Dr. Grosart's grave before the wreath-laying ceremony.
And his contribution to this village is immense. I mean, to have the care and the foresight to, you know,
to realise that people were coming back in a state.
Exactly, and he used to have them up at his house, and this was the boys' school.
Okay.
The one over the road was the girls' school, and this became derelict when
they amalgamated them.
And he thought, right, if we can, we'll buy that, and then we've got our own
base.
And of course, a century on, it's still thriving and still going strong. What a legacy he's left us.
Brilliant.
What a legacy he's left us.
Brilliant.
Remarkable man. Remarkable man.
As well as Dr. Smith's outstanding contribution to the veterans, he became a staple of the village community as its doctor, always on hand to help those who needed it, up to his death in 1952. At his funeral, his coffin was carried by 4 members of the club and was draped in the Union Jack. Ralph Towers, whose father was the funeral director, says that attendance at the service was so great that many, having walked from surrounding villages, could only line the pathway to the church doors. An appreciation written by T.P. Lewis stated, "We bid a very reluctant farewell to a grand man in Crick churchyard on Saturday. He was a true villager and one of us. No function was complete without his presence, whether it was judging the races at children's sports, readily singing a song when things looked flat at a village concert, or wielding a lusty bat for the village cricket team. The old doctor, as we affectionately called him, could always be relied upon. No matter how stormy the night, how icy or foggy the roads, even when well past 70 years old, no urgent call came to him in vain from any of the surrounding villages. The large crowd of his old patients on Saturday showed the esteem in which he was held. They remembered. He had no patience with imaginary illness. He did not cultivate a fashionable bedside manner. But, given a critical case, he did not spare himself. It mattered not a rap to him whether a man with lobar pneumonia was a wealthy man or the humblest panel patient. All his skill was at his disposal, day or night. He truly carried out his profession's noble oath of service. When, as inevitably happens, all his efforts were at some time of no avail, and there was a stricken household and fatherless children, he could utter simple words of consolation and comfort that brought solace and renewed hope to many a cottage home. We may not look upon his like again in our time, but we shall remember him and keep his memory green for many a long year in Crick, Barby and Kilsby and our other villages.
Well, we owe this man a great debt. It's a privilege for me to be able to lay his regimental colours on the stone. Thank you, Doctor. You've left a great legacy. Thank you so much.
At a time before the NHS, he was known for forgetting to charge anyone below the status of middle class. It is clear to see that having George Smith as his father shaped Dr. Smith's outlook on life, community, and those forgotten on the fringes of society. Dr. Smith's time spent in the RAMC, along with his father's progressive views on what needed to be done, shine through brightly in his progressive attitude to the mental health of soldiers returning home from the war. From what we have seen during our time in Crick, that community spirit lives on to this very day, and no time soon can we see Dr. Arthur Grosart Smith's legacy becoming a thing of the past.